and I was smoking a pack a day of cigarettes, and I was in a really dark place for like 3 or 4 years, drinking a lot, just like spending time with the wrong people. But then I found jiu-jitsu, my new love, and my new savior, Elio Gracie.
Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Mayn Idea podcast, where today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Paul Tokgozoglu. I want to take a brief moment to say thank you to everyone who took their hard-earned cash and purchased a rash guard and helped the rash guard sell out in such record time. Because it was so successful, we're going to do another rash guard run in May or April with new art by my friend and tattoo artist Max Hansen. The best way to stay up to date on this stuff is to subscribe at maynideapodcast.com with your email. That way you'll stay up to date and in the know about any future merchandise drops or anything that the podcast does. Many people have reached out to me after the fact and asked if I had rash guards left over, but they sold out. So if you give your email, you definitely won't miss it the next time we drop them. And for the true fans of the show, please take 30 seconds right now and leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. This helps the show get discovered organically, and it helps me to continually bring on incredible guests. And this means a lot. I want this show to be a show that grows because the listeners share it with other people that they care about, not because it was pumped full of ad money. So go to www.maynideapodcast.com, subscribe, or leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. Paul Tokgozoglu is a jiu-jitsu practitioner, academy owner, and the host of the Jiu Jitsu Outlet podcast, which is available on Spotify and YouTube in video format. I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Without further ado, Paul Tokgozoglu. So thanks for joining me, Paul. It's really fun to get to talk to other podcasters, let alone someone who shares as much passion for jiu-jitsu as I do. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day and joining me, man.
Abe, thanks for having me on the show. It's a real honor to be here, man.
Yeah, so let's go back to even before jiu-jitsu, because you have an interesting story, and I've been excited to chat with you about it. Growing up in a fundamentalist Christian family, and then later leaving, what was that like for you?
Well, just to be clear, I didn't leave my family. My family and I, we all kind of left the fundamentalist Christian organization together over a progressive amount of time. And it was interesting because my parents actually left the organization a lot earlier than me and my siblings did. And they kind of just encouraged us to keep going because it was what we were into. And there was nothing really wrong going on, so to speak, if that makes sense. Like, it's not like we were being abused. It was just a very fundamental church. You know what I mean? So there was no reason for them to pull us out. That's where our friends were. We were homeschooled our whole life. But all that started because my parents were very fundamental. Like, when I was growing up, they didn't, when I was very young, especially, they were really hardcore into, it was, what were they called? The Great Commission was the name of the church organization that we were a part of. And Great Commission churches are known for being a little cult-like and a little, little too much over the edge, so to speak. And they're just, they're super evangelical and very, I guess, traditional, or lack of a better word. Like, all the stereotypes that you might think of regarding Christianity and the things that you're allowed to do or not do, we met all those stereotypes, I guess is the way to think about it. But the big thing that stood out is the evangelical nature. Basically, and the way that I kind of feel like it turned into a bit of a cult is whenever it starts to have kind of a negative impact on the members who are involved in the organization, to the point where people are quitting their jobs because they're going to be full-time evangelical ministers, and they're leaving behind education opportunities, or they're saying no to scholarships because they're all in on Jesus. They're all in on spreading the good news of great joy, which is that, you need to say this magical prayer to accept Jesus into your heart, and that is going to save you from going to hell, basically. So the whole message is all about that.
And so I'm not someone who's very religious. Maybe I skew more like spiritual than anything, but maybe you can break this down for me a little bit more. So like fundamentalism, really, it's like biblical literalism, right? So you're taking every word of the Bible exactly as it comes through. And then the way that you go about living your life is such that it fits within those parameters and there's zero deviation. Is that correct?
For the most part, yes. That's what they try to do. And now we weren't as hardcore as some of the Judaic religions where they literally, don't eat shellfish and stuff like that. Like we
Sure.
ate shellfish. And it was kind of interesting. That was actually one of the reasons why I started to get out of it when I was around like 17. It's because I started actually reading the Bible and I realized how much of the stuff in the Bible we actually weren't doing. Because I was thinking like, oh wow, if we're gonna be literally following the Bible and God's word is law and this, that, the other thing, shouldn't people be getting stoned if they commit adultery? Or shouldn't people
Right.
be avoiding shellfish? Like I didn't see any, none of this stuff was happening. It was like we ate pizza and donuts and whatever the heck we wanted. And, and it was just, again, it was like we were hyper focused on the stuff about, we got to save people from hell. Meanwhile, that's not actually in the Bible. There's no part in the Bible where Jesus gets up on a mountain and says to his followers, like, hey guys, I'm going to lay it all out for you. You got to say this prayer. You got to accept me into your heart. Otherwise, my Father, God, is going to burn you forever in hell. Like, that's the deal. Jesus, there's no such thing. It's all allegory and parables and this, that, the other thing. And so I guess what I'm getting at here is they pick and choose. You know what I mean? Like that was kind of my experience. Because if you were to follow the Bible literally, it would not make sense. You would be at war with someone. There's a lot of crazy stuff in there. I don't even remember half of the crazy stuff that is in the Old Testament, but a lot of the stuff that a lot of the hardcore religious people in Judaism, for example, or things like that, they do take the Old Testament extremely literally, and that's why you see them. They can't cut their beard and stuff like that.
When you look back on that experience as a kid, like you grew up in this environment, right? So you said allegory earlier. It made me think of like the allegory of the cave philosophical paper about like you only know the world which is 100% in front of you, right? You can't perceive beyond the cave unless you go outside of it. So when you go back to like your memories, you as a child, we're such sponges when we're young, and we take in so much information. We form our early worldviews, and we learn how to treat people. When you look back on that, what are some of the things you felt were really positive about that experience? And when along the lines did you feel like you became aware of, like, I'm going to start thinking for myself in this whole thing?
That's a great question. And I think that the best thing that I took away from it was that it made me into a spiritual person. And I still very much believe in God. And that's something that we can talk about later on. But I definitely still believe in God. I'm definitely not an atheist. Definitely have a very, I guess, spiritual relationship with life that's how I feel anyway. So that was great, kind of being exposed to that at an early age where I just kind of came into life with this spiritual perspective, right? And eventually I did have a period of time when I was 17. And like I said, I started reading the Bible. I started realizing that a lot of this stuff didn't really make sense. And like, for example, Jesus says in the Bible that you're not supposed to pray in public. And every single Sunday, that's what we did, right? All the time. We were praying in public. I was at church like 6 days a week. We were praying in public every single day. Like it was a whole thing. Like, people would grab the microphone and get up on stage and be like, Lord, let's, it's like it becomes a big show. And Jesus literally says in the Bible, don't do it because it becomes a big show and it becomes all about you. Like he literally says that. So I was like, okay, so if my pastor doesn't know what Jesus said about prayer, how can I trust him about like any of this other stuff? And again, I was reading the Bible. I could not for the life of me find anything about hell. I was looking, you know what I'm saying? Like literally because that was what the whole message was all about hell, and you got to save people from hell and damnation and all this other stuff. Like literally I was on a mission to try to find this, and I was a believer. So you know what I'm saying? Like I was trying to prove, to validate it. I was like, where the fuck is this verse? Like, why could I not find where, like, clearly it must be here, right? Like if it's the core tenet of the faith.
Right.
It must be in there
It's got to be in
somewhere.
here somewhere.
Yeah, I was like, dude, I could not find it. So I started to read books about it. And one of the best books I read is a book called Love Wins. And I forget who wrote it, but it's a book called Love Wins. And it's all about just kind of like a different perspective on the Bible. Um, and that book honestly has a lot of crazy stuff in it that I'm not saying is all true, but it got me thinking about like, oh, there's other takes on the Bible. And really what the author was coming down to was just that there's no such thing as hell. Like that it's just, he was kind of validated a lot of what I was feeling too. I was like, oh, wow, this is an adult who also identifies as a spiritual person. And he's saying the same thing I'm saying. That's great. Like I'm not crazy. That was kind of the big epiphany for me. I was like, okay, this dude, and this is like a well-known book. A lot of people had their confirmations through that book actually. And if you look in the Christian side of things, it's a super controversial book. There's all sorts of stuff online about how this book is nonsense, but a lot of it comes from the fundamental Christian side because they really tried when this book came out to really like throw a lot of shade at it and be like, oh no, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But he's right, actually. Everything in that book is that he says about there not being hell in the Bible, that's true. And that really did it for me, honestly. Like that was kind of like the nail in the coffin. And then I left and didn't go back to church.
What I'm a little confused. There's a lot of mentions of hell in the Bible.
Right, but allegorically, and I'm talking about specifically
you're talking
from
about like they're saying if you don't do this or if you do this, you're going to burn in hell. And you're saying that those claims are not things that you could find.
No, there's
Gotcha.
allegories.
Okay.
There's allegories where Jesus tells a story about some person and they go into the fire and the flames and this, that, the other thing happens to them in the allegorical story that Jesus is telling. But that doesn't mean that you have to say a magical prayer to avoid hell. You know what I mean? Like in other words, I guess what I'm saying is there's allegorical stories about hell, but you could just as easily say that Jesus was talking about going through hell in the physical life. Like there's
like going through a tough spot.
Yeah, going through a tough spot, or maybe you're going to be put through something in the physical world here to help you have some sort of a epiphany because you went down a bad path. Because there is talk of that, of like, oh, the people who go down certain roads, they're going to be cast out on Judgment Day. And there's stuff like that, stories like that, like being cast out on Judgment Day. That's in there for sure. But again, it's an allegorical story. There's no point where Jesus gets up and is like, hey guys, I'm going to lay down how it works for you. The stuff that he does say like that, though, because he does have some stuff that where he does get up on the mountaintop and he does say what is most important. And it all just goes back to loving God, loving your neighbor, doing your neighbor as yourself is the golden rule. And he talks a whole lot about love and forgiving people. And, like not a lot of talk of damnation and here's all the reasons you're going to go to hell.
Why do you think that's left out in evangelical views? Like, why do you think there is this like skew towards fear, right? 'Cause that's definitely, I mean, if you're talking to children, right, and these are children that they haven't seen the world yet, and you're telling them that certain acts mean you're going to burn in an eternal fire. That's a pretty gripping image for a child, right? And when you're convinced that there's monsters underneath your bed and that the boogeyman's going to come and get you in the middle of the night, and you're susceptible to be afraid of pretty much anything, and someone who's in a powerful position that you trust, that you look up to, that's a leader in your community, that your parents look up to, says something like that, that's got to be like pretty overwhelmingly convincing. Why do you feel like they lean on those versus these ideas of love and compassion and treating other people as you want to be treated, and some of these other values that I feel like might be a little more universal that you would find maybe in someone who's just trying to be a better person, not even from a religious standpoint, but that from the evangelical approach is very fear first, repentance second kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think Well, for starters, they did do a lot of that stuff too, and they do have a lot of that going on in churches. And I'm certainly not here to say that the church I went to as a kid is a representation of every single church out there, because
Right.
I've been to other churches where they definitely do talk more about that and a lot less about the evangelical side. But my experience was growing up in one that did talk a lot about the evangelical side. And I think that from their point of view, it was all about we've got to save others, we've got
Mhm.
to save the world, and it was always about other people. It wasn't necessarily about us. That was more like implied, so to speak. Like, oh, obviously, of course, you're going to be a Christian because, well, you're here
You're
every
here.
Sunday,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, like, like, what else are you going to be?
Right, right.
So you said the magic prayer, right? Yeah, of course. I said it when I was 3.
Right.
Like I've been covered since then.
Yeah.
But it was all about, the other people, if that makes sense. And it was always from a place of compassion, like you were saying. Like
Right.
it was the kind thing to do. That's what we are always told is it's the right thing to do. These people out there, these heathens are gonna burn in hell, and it's up to you and me to save them. And if we don't, then shame on you, basically, was kind of the underlying message.
Right.
Like I even remember one day at one of our youth retreats that we went on, the pastor got up on stage and he said that he wanted us all to imagine that we were going up to heaven on the final day. Like we died, and he was like, imagine an elevator going up from the ground to heaven, and you're on that elevator. Uh, or no, not elevator, an escalator,
Yeah.
excuse me. He said escalator. You're on an escalator from the ground to heaven, and you're going up. And he's like, and then you see an escalator going down to hell, and you see one of your friends from school on that escalator going down. He's like, just imagine how you'd feel if you saw that your friend was going to go spend all eternity in hell, and all you had to do was just ask him to come to church on Sunday, because we'll
Yeah.
take it from there. Like once you get up there, Jesus will take him, take over. That was
Well,
the message, was like all we had to do was get someone to church, because Jesus is going to take it from there. Like once you get them in the door at church, you're good. You're
right.
solid.
They're saying.
And yeah, Jesus has got them basically. Like we might have to check in with them and make sure they're coming back, but your responsibility is done. So it was always pitched to us like it's the easiest thing in the world. Just ask your
Right.
friend to come to church. Like super easy. If you don't do it, you're basically a piece of shit. That was kind of
Right.
the underlying message. And that was the message given to 8-year-olds and
Yeah.
6-year-olds and people like that. It's like, well, you don't want to be on that escalator going up to heaven, and Timmy's going down to hell to burn forever. Like
Jeez.
that's
Yeah,
when I
that
started to
sucks.
leave, was when I realized like shit, that's the message that is here.
Is
And
there
it's no
so
good.
when you walk away from something like that, are there feelings of like regret or fear or what's going through your head? Because if you've been indoctrinated like your whole upbringing to believe a certain way, and then through whatever feelings or understandings or changes in your life, you kind of start to look at things differently. There's got to be part of you that's like, hey, you should quite. Are you sure? Because what if you're wrong, right? What if now you're going to get on that escalator that's going down? Are you sure you want to do that? Like, are you
Yeah.
are you thinking about that and grappling with that in your head, or talking to your parents and your friends, being like, "Hey, am I making the right choice here? Like, what if I'm wrong?"
Yeah, that was one of the biggest things for me, because honestly, I didn't have any doubts. Like, kind of once I had the epiphany, so to speak,
Mhm.
I was like, I'm kind of an all in or all out person. Like the people that know me
I
will tell
respect
you
that.
that for sure. And if I'm either all in or all out. So as soon as I kind of realized that this was a bunch of baloney that I didn't believe in anymore, I was completely on the other side. I was like, F this. Like this is not what I want to believe. I was totally wrong. And anyone that tried to convince me was suddenly my enemy. So I kind of went in that other direction of the
Right.
rebellious teenager, because suddenly I was like, yeah, I can have sex, I can drink, I can party, I can do all this stuff. So I like kind of went all in on being the rebel for a couple years. And I was smoking a pack a day of cigarettes, and I was in a really dark place for like 3 or 4 years, drinking a lot, just like spending time with the wrong people. But then I found Jiu Jitsu, my new love, and my new savior, Elio Gracie.
How so? Wait, is that really how it happened? So like
Yeah,
you left the church and kind of said, "Whoa, I can flip all these switches on that haven't been allowed," and you went like, which is totally what I would expect to happen, is you go
yeah,
like 0 to 60, you're drinking, you're partying, you're having premarital sex, you're doing all the things you're not supposed to be doing, And did you see this kind of snowballing? Like, were you aware enough to go like, whoa, man, if I stay on this track, this is going to be bad? Or were
Yeah.
you blinders on, fully just going down that road?
No, hindsight being 2020, I see that like I was really close to making some really bad decisions and just hanging
Mhm.
out with the wrong people and stuff like that. I would have probably ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time at some point.
Yep.
And I kind of unconsciously knew that, but looking back, I'm like, wow, you are a freaking moron. Some of the stuff that I used to get up to, I was a complete moron. And fortunately, it lasted, like a 3 or 4 year period. It wasn't like a 10-year period, but yeah, definitely could have gone down a darker route. But I was able to kind of pull myself out of that just because I realized that I wanted to do something more with my life. And honestly, I was tired of being fat. Like I've been fat my whole life, and it just got to a point where I was like really depressed about it. And I was like 225 pounds, smoking a pack a day of cigarettes, and my whole diet was just like fast food and Pop Tarts and stuff like that.
Wow.
And that's when I decided I was like, man, I'm gonna do something radically different. And I decided to join the army and started doing jiu-jitsu and judo to lose the weight and basically just kind of try to figure out what to do with my life. Because yeah, I realized that joining the army is kind of what I needed to do to like put myself on that right track. Because I knew I needed something, you know what I mean?
And
And I
was that a choice you made like all by yourself, or was this your parents and friends and people that care about you going, "Hey, Paul, we love you. Like, this is going one of two ways. You got to get your head back on, and like, here's a couple different options: join services, get sober, kind of, or like basically cancel all your friends, which is in and of
yeah,
itself an extremely difficult thing to do, and something that when people are trying to make changes, they struggle with because that's your social circle. So
yeah.
how did that choice get made to
It was
do
all
that?
me. It
Wow.
was all me for sure. They actually tried to talk me out of it, just about everyone who was around me. Like my parents didn't want me to join the military. I remember my mom said, she's like, you could get shot in the face. Like, what are you thinking? She's like, you could get killed. I was like, yeah, I know, but I got to do something. They ultimately would encourage me and everything, but at first they were like, what are you talking about? You joining the army? Like, no, you're
Right.
not. Like, you're never, I've never done anything athletic before, really. Like
So wait, how old were you at this point?
I was 19 when I decided I was joining the army. And I left the church when I was about 16 to kind of put it
Okay.
into perspective.
So basically,
So,
you leave the church at 16, you have this 3-year skid of just kind of like poor choices and going down a path that you're not psyched
yeah.
on. For you decide not to go to college, obviously, right? At that point.
No, I was doing community college.
Oh, okay.
That was
Okay.
actually where I met a lot of the people that I was getting in trouble with. And
Ah,
fortunately, like I wasn't like doing heroin or cocaine or anything crazy, but we were just binge drinking all the time.
yeah.
Like just
Can be
not.
just as bad, man.
Yeah. Oh, for 100%.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm saying is, just to put it into perspective, ultimately, I was having a good life. Like I had an easy
Yeah.
life. My parents were great. They look out for me. They were paying for me to go to community college so I could get my shit together because they knew I needed to get my shit together, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So yeah, and then I came back and I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna join the military and try to make something of my life. And I don't know. I just had this feeling like I wanted to be a part of something bigger again. Like that was the thing I liked about Christianity was like we were on a mission.
Yeah.
We got to save the world. So I think I was looking for that, and I went towards the military, and I was a prime candidate in retrospect. I was used to being indoctrinated into stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but I mean, you bring up a really, I think it's a really important point, and it's something that although I am not a religious person, I totally understand and respect why religion fits so well into people's lives. And part of it is because it creates this really strong sense of community. I think jiu-jitsu does this to some degree if you have a good mix at your academy and people around you. But it gives you something that's bigger than yourself, that has a trajectory. And that's powerful. That can give a lot of purpose and meaning and gratitude to a person that otherwise doesn't have it. And I think the military. So I have, not myself, but family members of mine that were service members, and it did the same thing. It provided them a ton of clarity and structure when they needed it most. And so for the right person at the right time, I mean, I think it can be an incredibly powerful, scary, and very honorable choice, but one that when made at the right time can be, I mean, it can be a life changer. You know, how many stories do you know of people who join the service and then completely 180 their life from being really destructive and kind of going down the wrong path to being really structured and getting their head on straight and then going about and having a great life. It's really powerful.
Yeah, and that was definitely me, and that's what it did for me. So I'm extremely grateful to the Army and everything. I was in for 6 years and totally changed my life. And yeah, I don't know where I'd be without it.
So were you
Um,
deployed then? If you were, how old are you now?
I'm 32 now. I was 22 when I joined the Army.
So then you were, I mean, we were in an active war during that time then for part of
Yeah,
that, right? So you
yeah.
were
I never.
deployed overseas or no?
No, I was stationed in Germany, and
Yeah.
they sent me TDY to Poland for 6 months.
Mhm.
TDY is like not deployment, but it's like one below deployment,
Yep.
or yeah, it's kind of like it's not a active war zone, it's Poland,
Yep.
but it's like you're still going on a military trip.
Yep.
So yeah, which was it was great experience, honestly. I got really lucky, really fortunate that I didn't have to go get blown up or have anything crazy happen or
Oh,
blow
it's
someone
crazy,
else
man.
up, shit like that.
It's
So,
such a talking to people that went over and served. It's just crazy. Like they'll talk about all the training, right? All the
yeah,
training leading up to it, all the preparation, all the mental and psychological preparation. And then a lot of people, they just never end up deploying, you know, or even in elite teams, sometimes they don't end up deploying. But then sometimes they do. And all of a sudden, that stuff goes from training to real in an instant. And the stakes are, you know, literally couldn't be higher than what you're then dealing with on a day-to-day
right.
basis. It's got to
Yeah.
be a trip.
Oh, yeah. And hindsight being 2020, I should have never joined the military because I'm on the autism spectrum. That's kind of
Mhm.
something I found out through being in the military because I started to have a lot of trouble as soon as I got on active duty because I was dealing with panic attacks every day. So it was just a little,
Really?
yeah, it's just the sensory of it was too much for me. And I didn't know that at the time. I got diagnosed with autism when I was 25
Yeah.
after seeking help because I was having so much trouble at work and I just
Wow.
couldn't really function. Like
Was it
I
like
was,
sensory, like lights, sounds, things like that were really intense for you?
yeah, and they still are. But I found that just working in an office in like a higher stress environment
Mhm.
was it's too much. Like I can't sensorily do it if that makes sense. Like
Yep.
between people talking, phones ringing, computers buzzing. The air I've found is very stuffy in all these different like office
Yep.
buildings. Like they don't change out the air filters enough, so
Yep.
the air gets like kind of recycled over a long period of time.
Right.
And I would just end up having panic attacks every day just from
Oh,
going to work basically and just being in working in an office. And we were working longer hours, but like it wasn't like I was deployed, so overall
right.
my job was easy. I worked on a computer. I made PowerPoints, so I was not stressful. I shouldn't have been having panic attacks. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah, got help for it and ended up, long story short, ended up getting out of the army in 2020, because it wasn't really a good fit for me to stay in. And I've worked online ever since,
Yeah.
and it's a lot better for my
What
mental
does
health.
what does a panic attack feel like for you? I've had two in my life, and they were both extremely intense and
Yeah,
random, completely
yeah.
unprovoked. Like I know both instances exactly like very well when they happen. What does it feel like for you when that begins to like when it initiates?
It feels like having a heart attack.
So
That's
it's like,
actually what most people kind of compare it to, but
mhm,
your heart starts racing like crazy. The walls kind of close in,
yeah,
and a big part of it is like I get really shaky. I go kind of nonverbal, so I stop talking. Like I
yeah.
kind of almost lose the ability to communicate, is what it feels like. And if it goes on long enough, then I just start crying, and
Wow.
and that's when it's like if it's really bad, then I
Right,
basically
right,
just lose the ability to talk and start crying and just turn into a slobbery mess of nothingness basically. But that's if it's like really bad. Fortunately I
right.
haven't had had one like that in quite some time, but those used to be like a weekly occurrence, just like total
Wow.
meltdowns. They call them autism meltdowns. You can look it up, but used to have an autism meltdown just about every week where I just turn into a blubbery mess basically. And
Wow.
that was because you need an outlet, and that's why I'm so
Yeah.
big on jiu-jitsu because it's an outlet. That's what the jiu-jitsu outlet movement is all about, is spreading that word that jiu-jitsu can be a very powerful outlet for people who have mental health issues, especially if you're someone like me who's
Right.
autistic, because it provides a release for all of that pent-up energy that just gets stored because you're a high sensory individual, if that makes sense.
Totally. So when these kind of things do set in, like I know it's been a while since you've had one of the attacks, but how do you come out of that? How do you get out on the other side of it? And is that something that the more you understand about yourself, about your diagnosis, becomes like easier as you deal with it
Yeah.
more, or what is that like? Because going from, in one moment to be a mess on the ground in tears and kind of like zoned out from the world, how do you reboot that?
Biggest thing I think is environment,
Hmm.
who you're with, who you're around. Like I used to have an ex-wife who I was
Hmm.
married to when I first joined the military, and we were married for a couple years, and our relationship just wasn't good. Like we just weren't good for each other, and it's nothing against her. Like she's a great person, but we just weren't a good fit. Long
Yeah.
story short, and that caused so much stress on me. So like that was a big thing, was just not feeling like I had a safe place to go at home.
Yeah.
So it's like I was at work and I was stressed out, then I was at home, I was stressed out. And that's really why I went towards jiu-jitsu, was a big part of it, because that became kind of my safe place, was hanging out with my friends at the jiu-jitsu academy. And that's when I got like super obsessed with jiu-jitsu because I was using it kind of as a escape. But that's the biggest thing that I would say and tell people. This is what I tell people, like, autistic people who have asked me for tips in the past, is like, you got to change your environment. Like, you're probably in a toxic job, probably in a bad relationship. Because the good news is like, just the best way is just to go be by yourself, like go hang out in nature. Um, if you're in an apartment or something, just spend some time alone, take a shower, take a cold bath. Like that's the best way to kind of get out of a panic attack. But usually what I've found is people can't get out of that state because they're in a bad environment. Like their family, their living space a lot of times is toxic. Like that's something that people who have mental health issues really struggle with, is that they don't take care of their space and then the space becomes toxic and then that increases the amount of
Right.
overwhelm they feel, which makes it harder to clean. And meanwhile, they're getting sick because they're
Right.
not cleaning. So that's a big problem. Like, so environment, I think, is everything.
So what was your very first introduction to either judo or jujitsu?
My dad, my dad's a
Yeah.
judo black belt. And when I was 7, he took me to my first classes in judo. And I didn't do it a whole lot when I was 7, but I went back when I was 15 and did it for about a year. And then I quit because I used to quit everything. It was like
Yes.
one of my things. And
Sweet.
but then I went back to it when I was 19 and haven't quit. Haven't quit since.
And when did jujitsu come into the picture?
They had a jujitsu class right after judo class, and
Yeah.
my goal at the time was weight loss because I was trying to lose weight and join the army.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I'll just stay for this too. It looked like literally the same thing, and still to this day, I consider them really just two sides of the same coin. Judo's more stand up, Brazilian jiu-jitsu is more ground. So yeah, I just did it because I wanted to get more calories burned, and I ended up loving it way more
So
than
and
judo.
I mean, obviously you're not 225 pounds now, so like
No.
is that really what did it for you? It was starting to take on the action of doing something active like jujitsu, and you just kept doing that, or how did that work? Because
Yep.
that's a serious weight loss journey. That's over 100 pounds weight loss.
Yeah, I lost, well, not quite. I lost 65 pounds in 6 months,
Yep.
and I joined the army, and I kept it up when I went to college because I did ROTC when I went to like a bigger school,
Yep.
and I kept up with it when I went to Germany, and just kind of always kept it as my thing. like I told you earlier, like I'm really kind of all in or all out. I think it might be the autism in me, but like
Okay.
autistic people we get kind of obsessive over stuff.
Yep.
So I've just always been obsessed with it. It's never been really since I started. I've always just tried to find a school. Like I needed it in my life ever since I found it, and yeah, the weight was easy to lose. Like once I really
That's so
committed
cool.
and
Yeah.
yeah, it came right off, because I was 19. So it was
Right.
as soon as I changed my diet and stopped eating Pop-Tarts and fast food, and I was
Right.
working out for 10 hours a week or whatever, like it's crazy. It all came off, like,
I
but
always
it
tell
was,
people like one of my favorite things to see is when you see someone join the academy, and there's a couple things that you'll notice, like their demeanor, their shape, like if they're a big person, a skinny person, whatever, and you see them change, like you see their psyche change, so like how they talk, how they carry themselves, how they act, and that's the mental health side of it. And then you see their body physically change, so you see these people go through transformation purely by way of jujitsu and what other things come because of that. Like they're training a lot, so they want to feel better, and they're tired of feeling bad, so they want to eat a little bit better, and then they want to sleep a little bit more, and then they're interested in recovery, so they want to maybe try cold plunge, or they want to try sauna. And so all of these things happen by way of the fact that they started to do jujitsu in the first place. And I think a lot of times those people wouldn't necessarily find success if they just went like a diet route or something like that. There's something very unique about martial arts, the physical nature of it, that it's like you and I want each other to get better at it, but we're also trying to beat each other at it at the same time, which is a super unique mix of like intention, I think.
yeah, yeah. I was exactly like you said. I was one of those people. Like it just had this cascading effect.
Was there ever like bullying or anything like that, being overweight as a kid?
No, I was homeschooled,
Yeah.
so I didn't spend much time around people. So
Mhm.
fortunately, like there were pros and cons to that, but
Right.
one of the cons was I didn't have a whole lot of bullies. Yeah, but I mean, there definitely was a little bit, but
Mhm.
nothing crazy because fortunately, the kids at church, for example, were really nice for the most part.
Mhm.
And again, like I don't mean to be here and talk trash on Christianity. At the end of the day, I had a really good childhood. Wasn't like I was raped and molested like kids are in the Catholic Church, for instance. But that's a different conversation.
You're like, I'm
But
not here to hate on Christianity, but while we're
yeah,
on the
but
topic.
when we're on the topic, but anyway, what I'm saying is um overall I had a good life. Like the kids I was around were nice. We were bought into a wrong spiritual concept from my perspective, and that did have a lot of ramifications on like my um I guess my mental state.
Yeah.
But physically I was a little too good. I was eating too many donuts and too many Pop Tarts. I was doing way too good, honestly.
Was there, you said that you had a knack for quitting things when you were younger. Was there ever a
Yeah.
point after you began jujitsu, like let's say well before it became like really kind of what you're about with Jujitsu Outlet and the podcast and everything like that, were there any points where you thought about stopping
Oh
or
yeah.
giving it up or taking a break?
Oh yeah. I mean, there was a time I remember it really clearly when I was a white belt. I was driving home from practice and I had just gotten absolutely destroyed. And I was just going through all those things that people go through when they're a white belt. Like I was feeling like,
Like
man,
getting your
I don't
ass
know.
kicked every day?
Yeah, I was sick of it. And I was feeling like I wasn't getting better. And what I realized is that the people that I was training with were still coming to class and they were also getting better. So I realized that I was getting better, but I saw that they were all getting better too. And
Yeah.
I could still never catch them. They were still beating me the same as day one, even though I knew I was getting better. And I was
Right.
like, God dang it. Like, I'm just never gonna catch these guys. And I was
Right.
like, I should probably just quit. Like that's probably the logical choice because I'm never
Right.
gonna win, And we didn't have this was back when jiu-jitsu was still pretty new, so it's not like we had a ton of new people. Like I was the
Right.
new guy. That was it. There was, 10 people at class. They were all
Yep.
better than me. Like so there was never some new guy coming in that I could like beat up or whatever.
Right.
And so yeah, that but I stayed, decided to stay because again, I wanted to lose weight, and that's what I went back to. I was like, well, I gotta lose weight, join the military, so it's
Right.
either this or running. might as well do this.
Did you wait? So when you were in the military, what a couple of my friends who've served, they did obviously hand-to-hand combat training, but they also did like this form of grappling or jiu-jitsu where they actually had a belt system that they would advance in within the military structure, where they were a black belt in essentially like military jiu-jitsu kind of grappling. Is that something that you pursued while you were in service too?
Well, they have something like that in the Marine Corps called MCMAP. It's called the Marine Corps Martial Arts Program.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
unfortunately, I was in the Army and I could not do MCMAP because MCMAP is for Marines, the few, the proud.
The proud.
Yeah, and we were not authorized to do MCMAP. But we did do some combatives training. The Army has combatives, and we did do when I was doing my military police training. Get this, we did a whole day of combatives. So that means that we were set. We were set, right?
All you need.
Yeah, that's all you need. They taught us a few little holds, and that was I guess all we were going to need for our duties as MP officers.
But you still had, while you were in Germany and while you were in Poland, you still had opportunities to train jiu-jitsu while you were serving, right?
Well, there's just about every single military base in the world has a jiu-jitsu club because there's people who train who are in the military, and then they just usually all meet up on lunch break and roll. There's usually wrestling mats at one of the gyms or something like that. So we would just do that, like meet up on lunch break and get some rolls in, and just a bunch of blue belts throwing down and a couple white belts and stuff like that. And maybe we would go over a technique every once in a while, but usually just there to get some rolls in and get back to work. But I did start training when I was in Poland. I started training at a jiu-jitsu academy, and that's where I got my purple belt. And then when I got back from Poland, I had the chance to move in Germany, and I trained at Matrix Jiu-Jitsu, which is the number one.
I know that.
Yeah, they're one of the best
schools. I was just in
schools.
Germany this summer.
Yeah, Matrix is one of the best schools in Europe, so I was very fortunate to train with them. They're the first school from Germany to ever send an athlete to ADCC. My old teammate Miraz Avdoyan, who just got beat by Luke Griffith in the finals.
Luke's a beast, dude.
Yeah, but
a beast.
But yeah, those guys. So I got to train with them, and they are just freaking ass kickers, man. They are next level. And the first time I went and trained with them, it's getting tapped every 30 seconds, and I was like, okay, like this is where I need to be. gotta train with these guys.
But see, that's a specific mindset, and that's one of the mindsets I love in jiu-jitsu. When you get your ass kicked, there's two ways to respond. One is I'm done, I'm out of here, and one's I need to learn more about this. And that's how I felt. That's obviously how you felt. I think for people that are excited and involved and love the sport of jiu-jitsu, the art of jiu-jitsu, we all had that moment, and all of us chose to go back and get our ass kicked more because it's exciting, and you realize that there was something that you didn't know that you needed to know more about. This Matrix spot. So when we did a summer trip this past year to Germany in May. We went Berlin, Prague, and then Munich. And I was trying to look for a place to train while I was traveling, and I couldn't figure out how to like get in there because their schedule is super weird. But Matrix is in Munich, is it?
No, they're in Kaiserslautern, which is about 3 hours from Munich. But
would that be closer to Berlin? No,
it's on the other side. It's near France. You might be thinking of a different squad.
I want to say it was Matrix. They had such a good they were the only ones that had a good website. Maybe that's why. Maybe I looked it up and it was so far away that I was like, there's no way I can go to there. But they had like a sick website. They had a pro team. They had their ADCC competitors like listed. And I was like, this is like a factory. They pump people out of here. This place looks sick.
Yeah.
So you were there for
a year
to brown
and a half.
belt? To brown belt?
Just about a year and a half. And then the Army sent me back to America. I ended up at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri. Yeah. Here I have remained since.
And how long ago was that?
2018 is when they sent me to Fort Leonard Wood, and then I got out of the Army in 2020, and I met my wife and stuck around. Now I live, oddly enough, I live about an hour from where I used to work, but
nice.
Live out in the middle of nowhere.
So do you train at an academy now, or do you run an academy?
Well, I run the academy. We Jiu Jitsu outlet. We just opened our first location
Yeah.
about 6 months ago, and we're up to 45 students. And
Wow, dude,
so I've
congrats.
got, thanks, man. And then I go to open mats usually on the weekend to get some training
Yep.
in, and then Thursdays I've been going up to Pedigo in Illinois because they're short drive away basically. So try to go up there once a week and keep getting my ass kicked because the
Well,
same
dude,
cycle continues.
yeah, so talk to me about that, like the contrast here between something like Matrix and Pedigo, because Pedigo, again, like these guys they're some of the best grapplers in the country right now, and they're definitely
Yeah.
making a name for American grappling across multiple belt levels too. It's not just like their top guys are good. I mean, all their guys are good. What's it like training over there?
Well, I've only been there about 8 times, so
Mm.
I'm still new for sure. I'm not pretending like I've been training there forever, but they're so good, super nice people first to start off with, like just the nicest, most welcoming group.
Yeah,
Um, but comparing it to Matrix, like I'd say it's honestly about the same pace. Like we
yeah,
would go hard AF at Matrix, and the same is happening at Pedigo. Like that's what I found with training at both those teams. Like, there's no secret. They are going hard every day, and
yeah.
they've rolled for a long time, and they get a lot of rounds in, and they go
Yeah.
hard, and they treat every round like it's a tournament, and they don't have any difference between the tournament pace and the training room pace,
All the
basically.
same.
Yeah,
Practice how you fight.
exactly. And the Matrix guys were more bottom game, more leg locks. Pedigo definitely more top game, wrestling and stuff like that. So the style is very different for sure, but the pace is the same, I would say. Um, and and the technical level at these academies is
Yeah,
insane. That's the other thing. One of the things about training at Pedigo, it's like a university. It's not just one dude. Like Heath is
right,
not like he's the head coach, but it's not like he's the only guy. It's not like
right.
he's the head honcho, and that's something that I think is really great. Like he is the head honcho, but there's a lot of other coaches too, and there's a lot of other
Mhm.
black belts, and everyone there is really helpful. Like everyone there will just spend time teaching you about some move that they saw that they think would work well for you, or some new way that they're looking at the game that they just wanted to show you just for fun, just for funsies, because they know you're
Yeah,
a nerd too. And it's like it's kind of assumed that if you're there, you're probably a jujitsu nerd, especially if you're
right.
past a blue belt. So
Yeah,
it's just all that's being discussed. It feels like I'm going to jujitsu university once a
yeah,
week or something like that. And I wish I could go there more, but right now, I can only get up there for once a week basically.
yeah,
But yeah, I've seen a big improvement in my game since going there. Like, been the really big thing that I've taken is just the intensity, just
yeah.
picked up the pace.
Yeah, it's those places like that at Pedigo, for example. I mean, the guys that compete are there. So I talked to Dante Leon, and you look at like the way that he grapples, right? You look at how intensely he grapples, how strong he is. You would almost think that it's like a little barbaric, but you forget how freaking technical all these dudes are. You forget how thoughtful they are and how chess-like they are in their game. It looks aggressive in the moment, but it's the point of the spear. They're really really thought through and high level on all the levels, from a wrestling to a submission, top and bottom. It's really impressive. I think that's one thing that's, we're in an exciting time for jiu-jitsu right now, especially with ADCC coming up in 2024, that you're going to see yet again another just fantastic showcase of elite athleticism and technical skill all coming together on the same night. It's going to be incredible.
Yeah, man, I can't wait.
So when I have to ask you about the podcast, what pushed you to start the Jiu-Jitsu Outlet podcast as someone else who does this? Why the podcast medium? What was it about that where you're like, you know what? I think that's something that I would be good at. I think that's something that's exciting. What drew you towards that?
Well, the year was 2016.
Yeah.
Well, it was back when I was in the military. I knew that I wanted to do something with my life, and I was so bored with the military. Like, I was so bored. I was overwhelmed. I was in a bad mental state. I was miserable with my relationship at the time. Like, I was just miserable. And I've been listening to tons of podcasts, like Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, Aubrey Marcus, just binging on podcasts because I was trying to figure out what to do with my life and how I was gonna like fix this, problem that I, kind of perceived. And I realized I wanted to work online and that I wanted to basically be able to, when I got out of the Army, have some sort of a career online where I didn't have to go to work. Because I realized that going to work and being in an office was not for me. Like, I just couldn't do it for my mental health. So I started podcasting because it was literally the easiest thing that I could figure out. And I was like, man, I want to do something online. I don't have any money. I don't have any skills. Literally, I had studied philosophy in college, and I had grown up an evangelical Christian, and I was a military police officer. So in other words, like, I pretty much had no skills, but I knew how to talk to people, and I knew how to hit record on a computer. So I started podcasting, and I started a Jiu Jitsu podcast called Matrix, which is still on YouTube. And then I transitioned into doing a show called Beyond Homo Sapien about human evolution and the future of humanity. And I did about 300 something episodes of that, which are still on Spotify and YouTube and everything. And I might go back to that show someday, but Jiu Jitsu Outlet really is my latest thing for the last 18 months. And I just kind of realized that I had a lot more to say about Jiu Jitsu, and specifically about how it helps with mental health and life off the mats. And I feel like that's kind of the focal point of the message that I'm meant to share, for lack of a better word. Like, I feel like I've got kind of a unique take on it. So I started interviewing people like yourself and just hearing from other people about how jiu-jitsu's helped their mental health. And my suspicions have been proved correct, were that the main reason that most people continue training is because of the mental health reasons, not because they become a ninja. Like, that's usually why we start, is we want to learn how to defend ourselves, or we want to learn how to lose weight or something like that. But we usually accomplish that pretty quick. Like, that's what I've seen with most martial artists. They usually learn how to defend themselves within a year, or they lose that weight within a year. And then the reason they stick is because of the mental health benefits that they get. So that's what the show's about. And that's ultimately why I decided to start my own academy, to give people that place, give people that outlet.
So you did 300 and over 300 episodes of Beyond Homo Sapien?
Yeah, and about like 100 something episodes of Matrix. And then I've been doing Beyond Jiu-Jitsu Outlet now almost 100. We're about to hit 100 episodes.
Yeah. So with 300 episodes, like, hit me with a lesson. What's something that you found to be wildly ineffective
with podcasting?
Yeah.
I would say the audio-based show. Audio is dying, for sure. I think that the audio will be, like, it's always going to have a place. But doing it only audio was like a complete waste of time. And I'm not saying that the audio doesn't get views. Like, it does get views, it does get subscribers. But, like, just go ahead and record both video and audio and just put that video on YouTube. I see so many podcasters who are only on Spotify. And it's like right now, we're using Riverside to record this conversation. Riverside records video and audio. Just put the video on YouTube as well. Like, I wish that I had done that sooner, because I waited to do that with all my shows. Like, I didn't record video for a long time. I just did audio. And I would put the audio clip on YouTube, but it would just be like a photo. It'd be like a photo of the person.
People won't watch that.
Exactly. But so many people do that. And I was doing that for so long. So that's what I really try to tell podcasters is, like, do video. Like, do the audio too, but just go ahead and start with video, because that's where a lot of people are going. Most people consume their content through YouTube these days, and it's so easy to just go ahead and do both.
So why don't you put your videos on the Spotify? I noticed that Jiu Jitsu Outlet only has audio. It has the YouTube channel, but it's only audio on Spotify, but Spotify allows for video.
Well, big reason for that is I just haven't had the time. I've been all in on YouTube, and that's been on my list of things to do, is like to do that, because I want to take advantage of that. I just haven't had the time. I haven't even had the headspace or time to, like, put the latest episodes on Spotify, let alone like do the video, because I've just
Yeah.
been kind of all in on YouTube with Jiu
Fair.
Jitsu outlet, if that makes sense.
I mean,
So
growth happens in so many different kinds of stages. I was gonna ask
yeah,
you why you haven't put an episode out since November, but that would explain it.
yeah,
But growth, like, I don't know, you look at how anything grows over time, and you could take a snapshot any point along the graph, and you're going to get a different showcasing of results, right? But it could be that, you take a break from doing one little part of it to work on something else. And so in the moment, it looks
yeah,
stagnant. But then if you zoom out over time, it's nothing. It was like a change in effort or decision. I feel like when you're going through all this kind of stuff and you're creating something, you have to be malleable and you have to be flexible in how you're going about it. Otherwise, it's very easy to get stuck in your tracks. But I would agree
right.
with you 100%. I mean, video is king. Like, I think audio wins on when people have to use their hands and their eyes when they do their job, but they want to hear something. It wins in car drives when you can't watch video, but you want to listen to something. But
Yeah,
so many people consume video across multiple platforms. So I say the same thing to everyone. I mean, something like Riverside is such a great tool because it gives you everything already all buttoned up, and you just have to upload it to different places. So
yeah. But
it's
yeah,
great.
I could talk about podcasting too all day. That's
Yeah.
like a whole other conversation for sure.
Yeah.
But one more thing that I'll say just to anyone
Yeah.
is like just get started. And try to
Yep.
have a unique angle. Like that's why I kind of went in the direction with Jiu Jitsu Outlet, because the other show was pretty stagnant. Like there wasn't really anyone listening to it, honestly, even though I'd done so many, and I was like, man, why is that? And it just was too broad. Like it just
Yeah.
wasn't niche enough. So again, if I ever go back to it, it's going to be a lot more focused. But that's something I try to tell people a lot is like you got to have an angle. You got to have something that makes it unique. It can't just be you talking about stuff with your friends. Like there's so many shows like that where it's three bros sitting around a couch talking about sports. Like
It's the hardest thing. And it's because
yeah,
everyone, you want to emulate your idols, and what do your idols do? I mean, Joe Rogan can talk to anyone, right? But he's earned the right to do that because he focused for so long on the things that he was good at. And if you look at anyone who's grown anything, you start small in the community that you understand, and you don't reach
yeah,
outside of the bucket. And then when you have a good community who's willing to listen to you, then you can reach outside the bucket. But that's
yeah,
like the ultimate crux of creativity, is
yeah.
wanting to do too many things and making too much stuff for too many different people, and then you end up with no one wanting to listen or pay attention to anything you're doing. Well, Paul, I don't want to
Yep.
keep you too long. It's been awesome having you on, and I appreciate you being transparent, sharing your story, the ups and the downs, because that's the real stuff. And I think that there's many people out there who are finding jiu-jitsu at the right time for the same reasons. So I really appreciate it, man.
Well, I appreciate you having me, man. And yeah, jiu-jitsu is really the best outlet, I think, for becoming better people, improving our mental health, and ultimately preventing extinction events.
So you've traded one gospel for another, my friend.
No, I really have. That's what I tell
Yeah.
people. And I know we're wrapping this up, but I really see jiu-jitsu as a spiritual practice. And I think that if there is a God, he made something like jiu-jitsu to help us. So I
Well,
feel like it's worth getting obsessed with.
I'll throw an amen to that. You know what I mean?
Hallelujah.
Yeah. Thanks,
Praise
Paul.
Alien.
I
Praise Alien.
appreciate it. Hey, friends, Abe here. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode and sticking around to the very end. If you want to support it, leave a 5-star review on Spotify or check out www.maynideapodcast.com, join the mailing list, and stay up to date on all things The Mayn Idea, from future guests, sponsorship opportunities, products that I'm using to help me perform at my best, invites to ask me anything, and any upcoming pertinent information to the show. I cannot do this show without you. It is literally why I show up each week and put these episodes together. So thank you from the bottom of my heart from being part of the community. I hope you have a great day.